All right, let's look at week 4. Our first thing is a PDF to read. It's a chapter out of a very famous book. If you're thinking about UX UI, I would strongly encourage you to read this book, Don't Make Me Think, Revisited. Um, and what we're going to learn here is usability as a common courtesy and why your website. So yeah, he's talking about website, but really it's applicable to user interfaces just as much because yeah, it is. So I think you'll find that very interesting chapter, and encourage you to read the whole book if you're interested. Okay, now related to your booklet, you want the user thought process. Um, in many ways, this overlaps with concept. It overlaps with some other things that you've written. But what you're trying to do is say, I think the user will do this, and then I think they'll go here next, and then I think they'll go here, and I think they'll go here. So you're kind of outlining your goals, but you're describing the process. They go from step A to step B to step C, D, E, F, etc. Okay, human factors. I want you to remember that before UX and UI was a term, which didn't really start till about 2015. So this is like new industry, relatively. Um, Everybody called if you design screen interface icons and the layout and stuff, you were called a GUI designer, GUI, which stands for Graphic User Interface. And you worked with a human factors specialist. Okay, so now those terms have been replaced with UI, user interface designer, instead of GUI, and UX, user experience. Well, user experience comes from human factors. So I want you to kind of tap into the history and just realize that what you're doing when you figure out user experience is really figure out human factors. In other words, how does the human body, the human, interact with your device? Now it gets a little more complex, say, if you're designing a chair or an automobile or something like that, particularly one like the cockpit of a plane that has to adapt to different heights and lengths of people, etc. So you have to make a machine that's adaptable. This is where the idea of human factors came from. It grew out of engineering and making machines useful for all people. Interesting study was done, I believe it was World War II, by the Air Force. And they wanted to design the ideal cockpit for their planes, for their pilots. So they measured all their pilots from elbow to wrist, from wrist to the tip of their fingers, the width of their hand, etc., the height. And what they found is that there is no standard for humans. we all vary in some unique degree, and that's just the way they are. So what they had to do was change the machine, the airplane, to be compatible to fit all these different body types. And that really grew into a whole industry called human factors engineering. Later on, when Apple before they released the smartphone for the first time, their version iPhone, um, they started looking at this and they called it HIG, Human Interface Guidelines. So slowly, but I just want you to know these two things are linked. The the engineering of the human to the machine is directly linked to this what we call UX UI today. And I want you to understand that the basic fundamentals, I think it's really important that you understand the fundamentals are making the machine work for the human. I think if you understand that history and that rationale, then what you do as an interface designer will be better than if you never understood, you never heard the term human factors. Okay. All right. Conclusions derived from your usability test. So week 3. Let me see if I've got this right. Yep. You know what? This could be a flaw in my system. Because week 2, you do the usability test. So I don't know why week 4 is showing that. So that shouldn't be there. So I will remove that part. I don't know why that's there. Do I want this? Yes. Do I want this? Yes. Do I want a color palette? Yes. And then I want you to build more screens. Okay, so everything else is correct, and I don't think you'll have any problems making the color palette. One thing I do want you to focus first and foremost on is either hex colors or, better yet, RGB colors, since that's how we use light overlapping lights to create colors. That's how the phone screens work. That's where all electronic devices, so they're all RGB. So don't just give me straight CMYK colors. I'll be really disappointed. And then as you start building these screens, start updating your InVision prototype and keep getting more and more screens in there. So I'll remove the usability test. I don't know why I got that in there. The overall plan was not that. Very frustrating. Yeah, the basic says week. Oh, usability. I did have that listed twice. Okay, I see. I made a mistake and I listed that there, and it's not supposed to be there. Okay, I'll make that change. Thank you very much.